So
Right.
um, let's get started. Those of the people that will join us promptly at the hour will recognize that the German is being super punctual, even over punctual, which, as my wife will tell you, is something that rarely, if ever, happens. So I'm not very German in that regard, apparently. But this whole studio live thing is still something that I am learning and practicing and experimenting with. You have done this more often, right? I've seen lots of your videos. You're being a guest, a pundit on national television in Great Britain and elsewhere. I've seen you on Deutsche Welle, the German
Yep.
public broadcasting. So you've had your share of media exposure and television experience. How did that come about?
Well, I guess really it's a function of several years of having to comment in client settings. You know, I get asked questions. You only have a few minutes, so you have to be pretty succinct. And I think on the back of that, and writing a few articles and giving talks, that a few news producers asked if I would want to weigh in on new business stories, and so I started doing that. Really liked it. It's a great discipline to have to, you know, to
Right.
condense complicated ideas into user-friendly terminology, so you don't alienate people
Mm,
that maybe may not be business people. And
right.
that's a really good practice, and I really like doing it. And that kind of just grew, and I'm very fortunate to still be able to do it.
Nice. Lovely. Thanks for putting that into context. And it is the full hour, so I want to make this official. Welcome, everybody, for joining us. This is the Culture Talk with my guest, Allyson Stewart-Allen, joining me from London, England. And my name is Christian Höferle, here in Atlanta, Georgia, originally from Germany. And Allison, where are you originally from?
I'm originally from LA, so I've been in London for 31 years now. Pardon the clock. So no, I've been here a very long time, but I still think of myself as a Los Angeles native.
After all these years in the UK. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big. Did you ever develop a feeling of belonging to London, to the city, or to the UK in general? Do you feel like this is you feel like you've been accepted, or are you do you still feel like people view you as the LA lady?
That's a great question. I mean, London's its own microclimate
Right.
because it's such an international place. You know, whatever, 11, 12 million people in Greater London. It's a very diverse, multinational, multilingual place. And so, in a way, there's lots of Americans, and London's pretty blasé about my American heritage. Whereas, as soon as you leave London and go to other parts of the country, you know, I'm then really different, and the accent's a little harder to place now than it was when I got here in '88.
Hmm.
And so I'm told it's more mid Atlantic, and therefore people wonder, like, well, so you're British, but you lived in the States? Well, no, the other way around. And
Hmm.
lots of interest. But yeah, how do I feel? I guess I feel London, which is not Britain, really. It's its own, like I said, its own place. I feel London and LA, which also is its own place. And
Oh
even though
yes.
I'm American, I think LA's got its own vibe, thanks to the entertainment industry, the defense and aerospace industry, the tech, entertainment tech industry. But yeah, that's still in my head. That's also home. So I'm a little bit schizophrenic in being in both of those places at the same time.
Isn't that our lives, right? So that resonates quite well with me because, yes, sure, people pick up my accent here in the United States, and for the first time in a long, long time, I was shopping safely in COVID times last weekend, and the person who checked me out at the cash register needed to check my ID because I was purchasing alcohol, and and then he looks at my ID and reads my name, and then he says, "German or Austrian?" I was like, "Oh wow." That doesn't happen often, not in the part of the US where I live. And I said, how did you pick that up? And he said, well, the accent combined with the name, it could only be one of the two. I said, okay. So he also picked up that my accent is German. Not every American recognizes my accent as being German. Sometimes people think I'm Russian, or if I have a really good day, which today I can already sense it through my monitor earbuds that today is not my best English day. But if I have a really good day in English, then people think I'm from the Midwest because that's where I spent a year as a high school exchange student, which probably shaped some of the way that I speak the American version of English. But I've lived in the U.S. South now for so long that some of those Southern colloquialisms have made its way into my everyday vernacular, and it sounds awful because when the guy with the German accent says y'all um, and other things, sometimes it sounds like I'm condescendingly mocking an accent, which I'm not. It's just something that happens automatically, and I'm wondering if that is something that you notice, but because we've talked before, right? And I told you this that sometimes some of your words that you pronounce to me, to my ears, sound a lot more British than American. So do you ever get this from people in your world that they think, oh, you're trying to posh or something? Are you trying to be British and you're not? Do people tell you that?
Yeah, they do. But I think, like you were saying, if you speak a foreign language, as you and I both do, we both speak, you know, interestingly, we both speak English and German and other languages too. And I think when you learn other languages, your ear is kind of tuned to getting the intonation right in that foreign language and wanting to master it.
Hmm.
And therefore you're maybe a little more attuned or sensitive to that. So, and I think, being here this long, uh, I too want to get British English right because it's a really different language to American English. It's completely different. And so,
Hmm.
if you want to get it right, then you need to use some of the words that are only in British English that aren't in American English. And I guess that probably is why I adopt the accent subconsciously.
Right.
Um, you know?
And the spelling, I guess, too, right? The spelling. How long did that take for you to set your autocorrect on your word processing to British English? When did you stop using Z's or Z's instead of an S?
Well, pretty much when I got here for work. I mean, I was moved here for a job with PA Consulting Group in February '88 is when I got here. And from that moment, I had to obviously write in British English.
All right.
And so getting the spell check right from then was super important.
Hmm.
And also changing some of the language, using adverbs rather than adjectives correctly, rather than correct. So there's things like that too. Not there's the grammar as much as the spelling.
Hmm. All right. Well, thank you for placing that into context. Now let's tell the people who are on here and who will watch the recording of this, what is it you do? And because I announced you as the American in the UK who is giving expert advice to people who want to do business successfully in the United States or with US Americans. So what is it you do and how did your professional career lead into what you're currently doing?
Yeah. So I guess it probably goes back to uni when I was studying international marketing as an undergraduate for my Bachelor of Science degree at USC in Southern California in LA. And I really liked the topic and stuck with it for another 2 years, getting an MBA under the direct sort of guidance of Peter Drucker, who's a management leadership was. He died now back in late 90, well, 91, I think he died. Um, excuse me, '01. So I think he sparked also my interest in all things international. And having lived in Munich as a kid, that too fueled my interest in European and US American differences and how you exploit the differences. Because there's an assumption very often in the US that the world is just like you, until you're confronted with it not being like you, and then you're kind of surprised, gee, they don't speak English. What's wrong with these people? And I found that quite interesting. So I took a job after my MBA with Price Waterhouse before the Coopers was even an idea in 1985, and wanted to do an overseas assignment with them to get back to Europe again, because that German experience in Munich from years 8 to 12 was pretty formative. So Price Waterhouse said, sure, 10 years, we'll put you on a list, and then 2 more years, we'll get you on a short list. And I thought, there is no way I'm waiting 12 years to get an overseas assignment. I mean, that's just insane. So I'm going to just do my own marketing campaign. So that's what I did. So I wrote to lots of different companies in Europe, mostly management consulting firms. And when enough of them said they'd interview me, then made the trip. But it was still all very tentative until I had enough to, you know, rationalize that I should go. Anyway, I left with very luckily with two job offers: one with CBS Records in Paris in a marketing role, and the management consulting role with PA Consulting Group. So I took the London role in PA Consulting and got here February '88, and have been really lucky to have been exposed to lots of different types of company across different sectors, and give advice on how to get international right. So basically, what I do, because I set up my own business in '91 called International Marketing Partners. And what I do is give advice to companies on how to localize and how to manage being locally relevant and globally relevant, and do the two things at the same time. And it's extremely hard. In fact, the bigger the company, the harder that task is for a company, because when you're a sprawling, large multinational, you have cracks between the silos. And unless there are people and functions that are running horizontally across the silos to knit them together and make sure that what they do at global and local levels are in sync, then the risk is really high that it's very fragmented and not well organized, and you make a lot less money, which is really the whole
Right.
point.
Right.
So that's
So,
in a nutshell what I do is give advice. So that's market research sometimes, looking at
mm,
how consumers or B2B clients behave in a different part of the world, so
right.
that my client understands why that behavior happens, which is always anchored in culture.
It is, and it's funny that, or not funny. It's indicative that you use the word why, because too often in our field, I recognize that initially first contact clients want the do's and the don'ts, because and when I say first contact clients is usually clients who are going about this global experience for the first time, or the stakeholders that we work with are doing it for the first time. The company may have had exposure before, but the people in certain positions are now doing it for the first time. So they think and act along the do and don't lines, and of course I'm happy to provide that, and I always do this with a footnote that you're paying me for this. That's great, and I'm sure you can get that elsewhere for much less money nowadays, because there's such a thing as apps and databases. You don't need me to read that to you, which I can. I have no issue doing that. However, there is more to your experience than the do and the don't. It's the why, the underlying belief systems, values, thought processes, traditions that float these do's and don'ts, that make them appear above the surface, so that when you enter this foreign world, it's what you experience with your five senses, right? So it, sometimes I feel like, and correct me if this is different for you. Sometimes it feels to me that we are clients come to us because they want to be safe on that in that new world, and then we pull them underwater and say, hey, this is what's lurking in the dark, wet, cold world underneath your do's and don'ts, and this is actually what makes your boat float, and so let's look at this before you actually swim out further, because you don't know what you're doing yet.
Yeah.
And leading clients to a deeper understanding of what they're encountering and how their markets are responding, and why is my product not selling, or why do my customers give me this or that feedback. My customers at home never did that. They just liked it the way it is, and why don't they like it abroad, right? um, do you have any quote unquote war stories or sanitized versions that you may be able to disclose of clients who fell on their faces with a product that went super well, or service that went quite well domestically, and then at
Yeah,
first landed
yeah.
or bombed when they took it abroad?
Yeah, well, this is quite an old example, and that's probably why I can talk about it. So the first thing is that we as humans inherently look for assessing whether the person or country is a friend or a foe. Are you going to be a threat, or are you going to be on my side? And I need to ascertain that pretty quickly as a survival mechanism. And we typically go into situations with new people and new countries, assuming it's the same as my home country, because that's less stressful. It's safer to assume that you and I, Christian, are exactly the same. While you're German living in America and I'm American living in Britain, actually we have much more in common than that's different. So I'm going to go into the conversation with you, assuming we're
Mhm.
really the same, and that then leads to a lot of different conclusions because I've assumed we're the same. And so the first thing you have to do is disrupt and change and challenge those assumptions. It says you're probably not the same. So besides looking at what the similarities, you also have to identify what the key differences are going to be or actually are, and then plan for those. So that's the first thing, is kind of changing the headset that you have going into any international business situation. And so, because the assumptions are that everybody's the same as me and every culture is the same as mine, companies mess up because of those assumptions. So many years ago, one of my clients was an American soft drinks business called Hanson's, and it doesn't even exist anymore. But it was all natural Hanson's. It started in juices, so it had a pedigree with like fresh peach nectar, and it was a bit like a Snapple, but a bit more of a California hippie, all natural, healthy.
Mhm.
And then they went into sparkling flavored water, and they were sure that this would be a huge success in Europe. They'd take their teardrop shaped glass bottle that was selling really well in the US, had a lovely design, shape was beautiful, a clear sticker with Hanson's logo, and a white screw on top, plastic screw on top. And they wanted to price it here in Europe as a premium product. So they come to me and said, "Isn't this great? Don't you think Europeans will love the look of this?" And I said, "Not really." "Oh, well, why is that?" Because if you're going to try, price it as a premium product, you cannot have a white plastic screw on top that makes it look really cheap. So
Mm.
either upgrade the cap or change the design. But I'm telling you now, it's not gonna you're not gonna get the price point that you're looking for in grocery. And long story short, they didn't think I was right, and this isn't about how amazing my advice was, but they went ahead anyway with the current white plastic bottle, or then current. So we're talking about like the mid '90s, and it was not successful. And
And
they
this was sparkling water, or this was flavored sparkling water?
flavored sparkling water,
Mhm.
and
Interesting.
it was a great new category for grocery stores and
Mhm.
soft drinks. But because they insisted that this is the look that works in America, and therefore this is the look of the design that'll work in Europe and the UK in particular, it just didn't work. And that's one of the challenges, is you've got
Mhm.
to look for differences. If I was going to be marketing an American product in Germany, I would want to know in great detail what are the service expectations of the German consumer or B2B client. How are those the same or different to what I do in the US? What adaptations will I need to make? So, an example of that actually was QVC. So, QVC launched here in Europe many years ago,
Mhm.
and part of that foray was the UK and Germany. And as you may know, jewelry, women's jewelry, is one of the best product categories and most profitable product categories for QVC. So anyway, they are promoting these bracelets to German women viewers. They're kind of chain link, S chain, thin gold bracelets, really keen competitive pricing. And anyway, long story short, they had about a 40% return rate in Germany on these bracelets, and in the US, the return rate was nothing like that. And they just could not understand what did we get wrong? Why did
Yeah,
that
what
not?
happened?
So
Why
it was
did it
about
go
the
wrong?
size. It was about the size of the bracelet. The size of the bracelet, the length of the bracelet was too small. So 40 plus percent return rate because they had not studied, getting the sizing right for a German consumer. So these sorts of mistakes are in part not doing your market research and your homework well enough, which is another story in its own right,
Now you
and
could
adapting.
easily say, okay, the culture is a culprit here, obviously. Now, but does that happen? Doesn't that happen in any direction, whether it is from the U.S. to Europe, or from Europe to North America, or from
Yeah,
Asia to South America? That this is just really spotty or even inadequate market research. So people, I mean, they're in the market of selling wearable items, jewelry. Wouldn't it behoove anyone selling that, making sure that the potential client customer is able to use the product, right? So how much of that do you think is culture, and how much of this is just really negligent market research, or and how are the two things connected, maybe?
yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's both, if I'm honest. So I think
Hmm.
some corporate cultures assume we got this. How hard can it be? We're
Hmm.
already really successful. You know, Going to some overseas market or international market is a piece of cake. We'll just take what we've got because it's so successful here at home, and we'll just
Hmm.
park it in that other country.
Right.
There's a lot of companies like that want an easy life and don't challenge the accepted wisdom that says, no, you really need to check out this assumption. So, I mean, Volkswagen, when they were launching the Beetle in the US, they did a ton of research, and they were not expecting to get any interesting data other than, maybe there's certain colors of the car that the Americans might like that, what be so successful in Germany. But what they did uncover is that the cup holder in the interior of the car was a deal breaker. And if you didn't offer the cup holder, Americans are like, what do I do with my drink? What do I do with my
Hmm.
iced latte? This is a problem. So Volkswagen retooled the assembly line, moved the manual transmission stick shift back a few inches to accommodate the Beetle cup holder. And how smart were they? Because it
Yeah.
was it's been a very successful model in history and now.
And let's put it this way. I'm not going to poo-poo one specific German car manufacturer, but this is also this is something, a cultural aspect that I've seen a lot with German manufacturers or German product design that is very successful in Germany or throughout Europe. And then they make this, what I call the German engineering arrogance mistake of taking the well-engineered German product that has proven to be successful in domestic markets, taking it abroad and expecting it to do as well as it does at home. And when there is pushback in the foreign market, well, this we don't love, we need a cup holder or whatever it may be, Then there, uh, German engineering, the traditional German engineering mindset is, no, we have designed it because we tested the market and we know what is good for you, dear customer, and you will love it because we built it. Um, and especially in North America, that is a lesson that a lot of, let's say, Central European companies are making over and over again. And as I said, I'm not poo-pooing just one specific car manufacturer. You were mentioning um, the fast fashion or the jewelry accessory market. One of our clients plays exactly in that sandbox. It's a German owned company who are selling um, modern fast fashion, young fashion jewelry that is at a point of sale with other fashion retailers. It's not, they don't necessarily own their own retail outlets. They piggyback on other fashion outlets throughout the country. And the challenge that their U.S. subsidiary has, and they've said it, they told their German headquarters, they told us as we did the cultural training for them, well, Germany is not always willing to bow to U.S. customers' special needs and desires and short notice requests. And then I said, well, this is largely because of yeah, of German culture, because German culture isn't known or not, especially with family owned businesses, it's not a learned behavior to be quick on your feet and adjust at a whim to a customer's demands, especially if the customer is not in the bag yet, if it's still uncertain whether they will do the deal or not. And the US customer wants to see that the supplier can a move in significant amount of product and can do that quickly and make the adjustments that that vendor wants for their customers, right? And there was this disconnect between U.S. can do, let's go, just do it, risk happiness, and the German more risk conservative. I'm not sure if we want to invest this much in a carrot dangling in front of us that may or may never be within our reach. Not sure if we should do that. Let's not. And in the middle of this was the US subsidiary of the German company saying, hey, we got a customer who wants our product more than anything else. And here we have a headquarter who doesn't want to give it to them. What are we going to do? So, what would your answer be in that situation?
Well, I think you have to make sure that the German company appreciates that there's a commercial price for that behavior. And if
Mm-hmm.
you run a business, you're interested in commerce, you're interested in money and making money and the bottom line as a pretty high priority. Not the only priority, thankfully, but a high priority. So I think educating them about the fact that they could be even more successful and profitable if they may fine tune their value proposition. I think they would then understand and want to change, because sometimes also companies don't know what they don't know. You know, until they kind of experience another place, if they're not super sophisticated in international markets, you know, they will rightly assume, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, that the world is like me and the markets
Mm-hmm.
operate just like my home market. And if not, then they probably should, because this is a
Mm-hmm.
great place, you know. So going in, checking those assumptions, but also quantitatively explaining how much more money you would make if you had more relevance and a better fit and adapted is often the way I try to frame the conversation.
Right. I just want to pause real quick and make sure that everybody who's watching this, make sure that you, if you have questions for Allison or perhaps for me, but mainly for Allison, because she has the answers and I only ask questions. At least in this situation, feel free to type them in the comment box on Facebook or yeah, make yourself known, and we'll address them as they come up. Now, would you say that you serve an equal amount of clients going from North America to Europe and Europe to North America, or do you specialize in one direction?
So it's probably 70-30 Europe into the US,
Okay.
and 30% or so the other way.
Mhm.
Probably part of that is because of proximity. I mean, I'm here,
Mhm.
so that's helpful. The other reason is I've written a book called Working with Americans, which is all about the US business culture. And our
Mhm.
second edition was published in late 2019. So it's a new book, a few months old. And on the back of that second edition, we get a lot of people here reading it who then contact me and say, "Oh, gee, I read this chapter on do it now and the American sense of urgency and the ready, fire, aim approach to business.
Mhm.
And what do I do because I'm being pressured to do this, that, and the other?" So, I mean, a lot of the questions really come from non-US companies and not just European. I mean, I have clients in the Middle East and in Asia with similar challenges.
So, going by your experience, what are the top things that European or Middle Eastern clients get wrong about the US, or what are the some of the obstacles the most costly obstacles you help them remove?
Yeah. So one of those costly obstacles is about adapting what you're selling, your product or service, to the U.S. market. So those adaptations could be around responsiveness. If
Mhm.
an American customer or client has a question, you've kind of got maximum 48 hours, more like 24 maximum, to get back to them with an answer. Whereas the way it works here, generally in Europe, is we give you an answer when we have an answer. So we get your email, it'll sit in our inbox. We're dealing with it. We're trying to solve your request or fulfill it in some way. And when we've done that, we'll write you back, which, for Americans is really not okay. It means you've left the company or you've been hit by a bus or you've been whatever. So that's really important, is that localization and of assuming that you, like, back to your example of your client, customizing and not standardizing, but making it the way the Americans want it, which will be they want to feel empowered,
Right.
that they have a hand in designing the solution, because we know that that gets engagement and commitment and all these great things. So that's one sort of tip.
Right.
Another tip is to go into the negotiations and the conversations assuming everyone's going to win. So the game theory needs to be win-win, not zero sum. So you need to
Mhm.
go into it finding a way for your US counterpart to make money or to benefit from your product or service, uh, in such a way as they and you are in this together as a partnership, and you're both going to win, but in different ways. You're going to win because you're
Right.
making money. They're going to
Right.
win because you're solving a problem.
Right. So
And
is that something that you notice with European clients, that they see the US market or foreign markets as an additional transaction that's a money maker potentially for us, so we do the transaction and then be done with it, collect the money, and that's it, instead of tuning into this what's it, I think it's called the most important American business radio station, WIIFM, what's in it for me, right?
yeah.
So addressing the what's in it for the client, is for the customer, is that something that your European clients are not cognizant of, or not as aware of?
No, they're cognizant of that. I think it's more about um, uh, zero sum. It's about making
Mhm.
sure I'll let you win a little bit,
Mhm.
I'll let you profit a bit, but
Mhm.
not a lot. Don't go crazy. I'm
Okay.
not. I'm going to temper your what you're going to get and how much you're going to earn from me, because if
Mhm.
you earn too much and if you are too profitable based on our business transaction, uh, then someone's going to have to fund all of that profit you're going to make. So
Right.
the assumption is that the pot is finite, and that
Mm,
we allocate the pot of resources in some equitable way, but we don't let any one person or a few people be a bit too greedy. We're going to moderate your greediness.
mm.
And so you go in, that Europeans generally go into these conversations with the pot is finite and you're only going to get this kind of resource. Whereas in the US, we're not aware of any constraints on resources. Pot
Yeah,
is huge,
I think
infinite, you know?
this is so great that you bring this up because this is a mindset that I had to overcome because I grew up in Europe, and even though I never lived through the horrible times of the 20th century, I heard it retold through my elders, through my grandparents and my parents' generations. So a lot of European cultures, whether they are any European culture that was affected by the two big wars in the 20th century and by German aggression, have these stories of scarcity and stories of that the pot is finite. And when I came to the US, I gradually accepted and had to learn that there that there's an abundance mindset, and abundance versus scarcity, those are things that I think are diametrically opposed. And I think the scarcity mindset is more prevalent in Europe, and the abundance mindset, the everything's possible, American dream, can do spirit, that is a more North American way of looking at life. And that, as you correctly said, this shows up in business transactions to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see it regularly playing out. But it's back to your earlier point of what's keeping the boat afloat. Why does that happen? Well, why it happens is
Right.
because of history. Europe has known the plague and great fires and world wars and famine. Uh, in its long history, and the U.S. it hasn't really had much of that in its short history.
Hmm.
I mean, obviously, now with COVID-19, I'm sorry to say, that's going to change things a lot.
I think
Uh,
so too.
but prior, there was plenty of everything. We had a glimpse in my lifetime. We had the gas shortage in the 1970s. But other than that, America's generally been an abundant place, and therefore you can go into these conversations on that with that mindset.
And the only, and I might be wrong, but the only memory, collective memory of scarcity in the US that I think is still being perpetuated is that of the Great Depression, of the Dust Bowl area. And that is, sure, that's also first third of the 20th century, but it was limited to certain pockets of the country. It did not affect an entire continent the way two world wars and two economic collapses did throughout Europe. So there's I think a different level right there.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Um, Catherine on Facebook has a question that I do not want to let go. Catherine Spehar, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing her name right. Catherine has been on webinars here before, and sometimes she's got that that Slavic double hook on the S, which I believe turns the S sound into a sh sound, but I'm not quite sure. So I'm supposing it's Catherine Spehar, and she says, so when people return to their own country, do they bring some of that American sense of urgency? Do they find that they have changed?
Yes, in a word, yes.
Mm,
The longer you are in another country, whether it's the U.S. or Hungary or Czech Republic, wherever it is, the longer you're in another country other than your home country, the more you pick up the culture and either bring it back willingly or suppress it because it won't make you successful.
hmm.
Or it'll just make you incredibly frustrated that the country you're from and you come back to doesn't have the best attributes of the country you just left. And so I think the challenge for international people, like all of us watching this and being here today on this webinar, the challenge really is getting the best of both integration and trying to see, what's great about America, what's great about Germany, UK, South Africa, Japan, and how do we bring those things together and do both of those things? Because they're not in opposition, but there are ways to do both. But it requires
Here's the thing with
attention.
not in opposition, that's a critical point, I think, because I don't know about you, but some of our clients still feel that they have to um, uh, complete that struggle or end that battle between this is better than that, or so my way is better than their way, or their way is better than my way. And I get these questions. I don't know about you, but I get this question: what do you like better, Germany or the United States? And my answer frustrates the heck out of them because it doesn't satisfy their need for a black or white answer, right? So my answer is typically none of them are better, and both of them suck in their own right, and both of them are awesome in their own right, and it's the nuance that matters, right? So um, letting clients, especially in our world where we deal with corporates who are in love with their product, they're in love with their widget, they have designed something that works really well on their end, and now their foreign market is telling them, well, this is nice, but so it's like a punch to the gut. And how dare they don't like my product because millions of customers here can't be wrong. So how do we lead people to recognizing that there is a lot of gray and not just black and white? Okay, this was a bad metaphor. And as you hear my dog barking, this is what Facebook Live is like. If you're in COVID and you're at your home office, there sure as hell will be a disruption. So there we go. Meet my
That's
dog.
okay.
You might actually
Okay.
get to see him.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're talking about is complexity, and I
Hmm.
think you know we the human brain seeks clarity rather than complexity. And so, one of the things we try to do is minimize the noise and the stress that comes from too many data points, too many things that seem dissonant. We look for confluence, we look for convergence, and we look for simplicity. And so, the challenge is educating a client and a company and a leader about the benefits of letting that complexity just float, suspending it, letting it happen, and understanding why the complexity exists. Why are you being pulled in these two directions? And isn't that a good thing? Because you're not trying to be this year, it's all about the top line, sell, sell, sell. Next year, it's all about the bottom line, cut costs. And if you keep doing that, you waste a lot of money, you waste a lot of energy, and you waste everybody's focus because it's like, oh, we're doing something completely different now. Okay. So the goal is to incrementally improve. And if you have that cultural understanding and insight, then you can incrementally improve
Mm.
and offer different value propositions to different parts of the world. I mean, let's think about some of the leading consumer product companies we know. Okay, so Heinz ketchup, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, all of them offer country-specific recipes
Yes.
because they have to. So, Heinz is sweeter in some parts of the world, more vinegary in others. Coca Cola is more carbonated and sweeter in some places and less so in others. McDonald's has the korma in India, which is a lamb based burger. The
Hmm.
macarabia in the Middle East, which has a lovely shawarma type of sauce. It offers hummus. You've got Mexican items on Southern California stores. In
Right.
my office, where I'm sadly not, I'm working from home like we all are. But in my office, I have an example of when I was in Singapore on business and I went to Starbucks. And I'm looking in the chiller cabinet for something to go with my big by Singapore standards, my big coffee, which is by American standards probably a small. And I noticed that they have lovely looking wraps in the chiller cabinet as you walk by it. And I
Hmm.
thought, oh, those are really nice. Gee, look at that one. Ham and cheese or something that looked good. But unlike the wraps that are sold in most stores, it was one half of a wrap in a package, not a whole long wrap cut in half and two halves in the packaging. It was
Right.
one, and I thought, is
Same amount or half the amount?
half the amount,
Okay. Hmm.
which I thought was really interesting because obviously they don't gorge themselves maybe on a full wrap. A half a wrap will do. And so I ended up buying the half wrap partly for the packaging to be able to kind of talk about this stuff.
Right.
Product sizes, think about the Trenta coffee from Starbucks. It's 30 ounces. It's sold in the US. It's not sold in Europe. 30 ounces of any drink is a full bottle of wine and a few more ounces on top. So it's
Well,
large.
if it's water, we're not having this conversation, right? So because where I am, it was still somewhat breakfast time. Well, I haven't had breakfast yet, but this is my coffee cup. This is a cappuccino cup, I guess. This is what it looked like afterwards. Um, this is the biggest coffee drink size I will have all day. This is what I will have in the morning. The rest of the day will be espresso cups. So this would be probably an ounce or so. A Trenta cup is to everyone who is into Italian coffee culture, which is what Starbucks supposedly was inspired by and was hoping to bring to North American and now global customers. Italian coffee culture has nothing to do with Starbucks. So if you're
Exactly.
watching this and you're a Starbucks fan, I hate to tell you, you're a, you're paying through your nose, and B, has nothing to, and it's funny how they give it Italian names, a Venti and a Trenta, and nobody in Italy like, what the hell are you doing,
I
porca
know.
miseria? This is heresy.
So
Um,
I just have to tell you about the interesting, and it's again back to this cultural stuff.
yeah.
Interesting Starbucks flagship store they opened in Milan.
Yeah.
So I went to it late last year, sort of
Hmm.
September, October last year, and it was like a temple to coffee. It's in a former very large old post office building in the heart of the
Hmm.
retail district in Milan, and you go in
Okay.
and beautifully. The fittings and fixtures are absolutely stunning. Lots of copper, lots of
Hmm.
glass, dark brown colors, etc. Anyway, they partnered with an Italian bakery company called Princi.
Hmm.
And that was really interesting because they're trying to buy authenticity through that partnership.
Right. Right.
But Starbucks is still American, and yet you had Italians in there, which is kind of interesting that you can be an American company reinterpreting an Italian drink and sell it back to the Italians in a different way.
And I think, and I think this is critical about Italians. I think Italians and the French are quite different in that regard, because for French people that would be heresy to their Le Grande Nation.
Yeah.
Italians traditionally, with their huge immigration population in the United States, have seen the comeback from what is Italo America, and have embraced it, because America was what liberated Italy and Germany, or large parts of Germany, after World War II. So many Germans and Italians see the United States as a big brother who was the liberator, and therefore we give the US a lot of credit. So even if you may not get it 100% right, we still want to check it out because it's Americano. And maybe it is a little bit cool. Maybe it is not, but at least we can make fun of it if it's not. So it's almost a love-hate relationship, right? That's a and knowing that, and kudos to Starbucks for trying what they can in order to buy authenticity or buy credibility. I want to come back to Coke and McDonald's. Not that these are brands that I would endorse. I don't use a lot of their products, to be honest. But I'm also not going to discredit them. I live in Atlanta, where Coca-Cola is headquartered, and if you ever get a chance to come to Atlanta, visit the Coca-Cola Museum. Not because it's a temple to sweetened carbonated drinks that will make you really fat and unhealthy, but because you can study global marketing. There's a tasting room in the Coca-Cola Museum in Atlanta where you can taste yourself through, I don't know, 50, 80 different flavors from Coke products around the world. And some of them you will like because you're like, oh, that's different. This is interesting. And others you'll find, or quoting my 13-year-old, then 13-year-old daughter, saying this is disgusting. So it they do a really good job in customizing and localizing their product to local needs and market desires. And the same can be said of McDonald's. I remember we did a lot of cultural trainings for expatriates going from the US to Germany, and then they came back. And one of the stories that the returnees always tell us, it's unbelievable they sell beer at McDonald's in Germany. So
Yeah.
which would be unheard of in the home market. And then they also sell the burgers with bratwurst on top. So another form of localization that McDonald's does very well. So whatever you think about these global mass consumer products, however your nutritional values line up with the products that they sell, they're really successful because they understand how to localize their product. How successful is your product?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Right?
in this little museum in my office, besides having the Trenta Starbucks coffee cup, I also have a few Kit Kat candy bars from Japan,
Mm, the green ones, yes.
the green ones. So,
Yeah.
there's two green ones. There's the green tea Kit Kat bar,
Hmm.
which is a white chocolate and green tea uh, coating, and a wasabi Kit Kat bar,
Oh,
which is interesting.
is it spicy?
Yeah,
I've never had that one. I had the green tea one. I never had the wasabi one. Okay,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
intrigued now.
yeah. Then there's the other example I have is Lay's potato chip
Hmm.
has kiwi flavored potato chips for China
Okay.
and Southeast Asia. That's really popular flavor there. So it's fun to look at this stuff because you realize that one size does not fit all. And you know, there's a British cheese cracker called
Hmm.
Digestives. The brand is McVitie's Digestives, and they're like graham crackers in the U.S. in a round kind of cookie shape.
Hmm. Hmm.
And in Paris, when I was there on business recently, I picked up these. They're very. It's a British cultural food, right? Very much like I don't know. Beef bourguignon is in France. So I
Right.
pick up packaging in French, and it says as the strap line, "It's English, but it's good." And I thought, that's for France because they're not
Flavor, it's
expecting
English.
it to be good. So they're like, "Oh, okay, I'll try it."
Oh, awesome. Gotta love the French. And well, actually, it was probably the British marketing department that did a great job to
Yeah.
alleviate French consumer fears. So you mentioned earlier you wrote a book about being successful with and around people from the US. Tell us about
Yeah.
the book. How can people get it? How can they access it?
Yep.
What's the deal behind it? What made you write it?
So the book, the second edition, is published by Routledge, and
Mhm.
it's orderable via our book's website, which is really easy, workingwithamericans.com.
We'll
And on
post a
this,
link in the comment box later so you can actually
lovely, thank
get to it.
you. And there's 2 free chapters that anybody can download for free to read,
Hmm.
and also links to all the major booksellers, Amazon, lots of other people. What made us write it? I think it's because Lainey and I had had regular conversations, my co author, Lainey Denslow. And she and I had regular conversations with me being here, her being in California, about the challenges that our respective clients kept facing and coming up against in trying to crack the US market. Some were already in America, in the US, and weren't doing as well as they wanted to do. Others were thinking about growing in the States, but weren't really sure what they'd come up against. Most of the time, um, then and now, we're approached by companies that have tried to grow in the States and something's not gone to plan. There's
Hmm.
been an unexpected surprise. It's usually expensive. It's usually something that is fixable. And so that those are usually the triggers that drive the conversation in
Hmm.
helping leaders and their companies to not make the assumptions that American English is British English, for example, couldn't be further from the truth.
Right.
Think that Americans are much more transactional than in many other parts of the world, compared to Asia, compared to Middle East, compared to Europe. The U.S. is about let's do the deal, and then I'll get to know you. But you've
Mm.
got money, I've got the product or service. Let's do a trade, and we don't have to really like each other. It doesn't really matter. It's about the money. Whereas in these other cultures, it's about the relationship. You know.
Right.
So we're very explicit in the U.S. We're very quantitative. What we say is what we mean because that's the nature of American English. And so it really can be tough if you haven't experienced the US before. And I often say you should treat the US like you treat China. Assume the language is completely different, the foods are different, the purchase and decision making behavior of your client and customer is completely different. And then you'll probably do well because you are
Right.
assuming difference rather than assuming similarity.
And I like the China comparison because I would add a line. Yes, assume the difference and assume just like China that it's not one homogeneous culture, that there are pockets and regions with distinctly different behavioral norms or phenomena.
Yeah,
There's been a lot of studies out there. I'd be happy to post links in the comment box later that'll illustrate it. Some people are talking about the 11 quote unquote nations of North America, which I wouldn't go as far as calling them nations, but subcultural regions, because LA is not Seattle. It's the same time zone, it's the same coast, but two different behavioral types. New York is not Miami, and Atlanta is not Chicago, and the country is not the city. And there's so many nuances, and the same can be said of many cultures, whether it's China or the UK. I mean, it's different whether you live in York or in Liverpool or in London, right? So Germany, Munich is not Berlin. So there's knowing about these regional differences might make or break your deal.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
Chicago is not Dallas.
No.
And also, interestingly, the physical geography of these places also dictates how people behave. So there's the weather, there's the
Yep.
commuting pattern. LA is all about the car, which is why newspapers have never really done very well in LA,
Yeah, it's
because
radio. Yeah.
it's radio, because you're stuck in your car,
Yeah.
you're sitting on a
Yep.
freeway.
Yeah.
Whereas
On the
you're on
405
public,
waiting to get somewhere.
exactly. But if you're on public transportation in New York, you're on the subway.
Hmm.
You are likely to read the New York Post or
Right.
or Kindle or a book because you're stuck there and captive for so long.
I was never aware of this as a European coming to the US until I met somebody that I would call a mentor, and this is completely sidetracking now, but that's okay. When you said at the very beginning how you had to become or learn to become very succinct in your messaging when you go on television, one of my mentors that I worked with several years ago is a former talk radio host from LA. He was one of the top LA talk radio people, and he had an accident with his hearings many years ago, so he can't wear headphones anymore because of his tinnitus. And he does uh, training, coaching for communication training for people like you or me who go on stages or who go in front of a microphone and a camera and have to learn how to massage their message in a way that it gets the 30 seconds and the 60 seconds, or what he would say, you have to create a short memo that explains to the reader or the audience that the long memo is necessary. So I'm still learning. I'm still struggling with this. Hence, a 1 hour format for this. We could have done a 60-second commercial for the book, but that's not the purpose of this.
Yeah.
Um, so back to the book. So there's 2 chapters available online. So people, what's better for you? That people buy it off of your website or they buy it off of Amazon?
Yeah,
What's more
either.
lucrative for you?
Yeah, well, if you're in the UK, uh, well, actually, having said that, that's not true. If you go to the Routledge website, so that's our publisher,
Hmm.
ROUTLEDGE, routledge.com.
Hmm.
And if you put in the code WWA20, you'll get a
Oh, I
20%
need to write that down. WW820. Let's put that in the chat box right now. So
Mhm.
Routledge is ROUTLEDGE, right?
Correct. So at routledge.com, which is our
Hmm.
publisher, if you
Hmm.
put in the code at the checkout WWA20, you get 20% off.
WW820.
Yeah. So there's a
Oh,
20% off discount running through the end of the year for
okay.
anyone interested in getting the book.
Okay. Cool.
So, yeah,
Excellent. Thank you. We
pleasure. But
posted
it, yeah,
posted in the comment box so people make use of it.
great.
Now, talking about publishing, because I haven't published a book. So for you, if you sell it on Amazon, is that just a bycatch, a byproduct? It doesn't really ding make a ka-ching in your register, or does it make no difference where you sell the book?
We don't really care where we sell it. We're more interested in helping these you know, our viewers today
All right,
or anybody in international business to try to make it easier, happier, more profitable.
right.
So, yeah. So we don't care where they buy it. We just hope that they find it useful.
Again, a good example, a perfect example of what you said earlier. So this is the abundance approach rather than the transactional scarcity
Correct.
approach. So just get it, and it'll help you, and then eventually it will lead you back to Allison because you want to work with her one on one because the book is fine and it's a great calling card. It's a great um, gateway drug, quote unquote. But the you get your real fix with Allison directly, right? So how to get people hold of you? Let's put that in the
Yeah.
comment box. What's the best way for people to
Yeah.
get
So the
a hold
best
of you?
way is by email.
Hmm.
So my email is Allyson, ALLYSON, at
Hmm.
intermarketingonline.com. And the
Excellent.
website, yep, intermarketingonline.com is also the website.
Mhm.
So I can be reached through the website. I can be reached by email. Or LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. At Muse of Marketing is my one of my two monikers. Yeah, I'd love to hear from people with
Excellent.
anecdotes or with challenges.
Excellent. Thank you for taking time today. Think it is. What time is it in London now? It's what 4 p.m. Is it about
Yeah,
tea time?
yeah, exactly.
Do you do tea time? Have you
I don't
adopted that tradition?
time. I no, I do. I do coffee. Really, I'm still American at heart.
Do you take a biscuit with your coffee at least?
Well, there's a good question. So, no, usually it's just the coffee.
All right. There we go.
What a great
That
question.
that
Thank you.
that gives it away that you're still the LA person, not that you have not become fully Britanized. All right.
Exactly right.
Now, I need to know this because I'm always curious about cultures, and you've lived in the UK for so long. What's right now? We're in COVID times, and we're binging on media products more than ever before. What is the one movie, the one TV show that you would recommend to people to get a better understanding of how the British tick?
Wow. So it's that's a great question. Um, Gosh, I would probably think about Downton Abbey
Okay.
because it's all about the class system, protocols, rules, and I think those are firmly embedded in the culture, both
All
national
right. Good
culture
one.
and the business culture.
All right. Thank you for that. And while I was waiting for your answer, something popped up in my head. I think what because English in North America and the English in Europe are so distinctly different, so is the humor. So if you haven't done so yet, I would invite you watch The Office and watch the British Ricky Gervais version of The Office and watch the American version of The Office. Both hilarious. If you're from North America, the British version will be for a while. It will take you a second until you understand the humor. However, if you are a fan of The Office US, you have already learned some of that under the skin type of sarcasm that came from the original, but you will see two distinctly different adaptation of the same topic or the same comedic genre. So um, find it. I'm telling you, if you haven't done so yet, the British version will hurt because it's painful to watch it, but it's also hilarious if you get the British humor.
Definitely.
Allyson, thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for taking time today. Please be safe. Take care of yourself. Take care of your loved ones. The situation is no laughing matter, and we hope we brought an hour of entertainment or insight into people's lives today to take our minds off of this crazy situation that we are facing right now. Um, Yet there is there will be a new way of being that will hopefully be without fear.
Yeah, I think you're right. Thank you for the invitation. I've really enjoyed it today, and thanks to all of you for tuning in today too.
Thank you.